In the year 2000, Congress voted 237 to 197 to open permanent trade access to China. Within a decade, 12 American trades that had anchored the middle class were hollowed out. Apparel lost 85% of its workers. 70% of furniture job losses were driven by imports, not automation. But this did not start in 2000. The first crack opened nearly 40 years earlier. In October 1962, Congress passed the Trade Expansion Act by a wide margin, 298 to 125 in the House, 78 to 8 in the Senate, handing the president unprecedented power to cut tariffs by up to half. President Kennedy called it a new era for American trade, promising growth through global competition. Almost immediately, the first signs of strain appeared. The Kennedy round of GATT negotiations, finalized in 1967, slashed tariffs on industrial goods by an average of 35%, using the so-called Swiss formula. These cuts lowered barriers on $40 billion worth of imports, with the goal of opening markets for U.S. exports. But the impact at home was swift. U.S. machine tool makers, long considered the backbone of industrial America, saw imports from Europe and Japan jump by 10 to 20% within a year. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked the shift. Import share in key manufacturing sectors began to climb, even as domestic output held steady or declined. Congressional hearings from the late 1960s warned that the first cracks in the wall of protection were beginning to widen. For the first time, American workers in steel, textiles, and machinery faced a new kind of competition, one shaped not by invention or productivity, but by policy decisions made in Washington. By 1994, the pace of trade liberalization in the United States had reached a new intensity. That year, Congress approved the North American Free Trade Agreement, eliminating tariffs on nearly all goods traded with Mexico and Canada. The House vote stood at 234 to 200. The Senate vote was 61 to 38. Within just a few years, imports from Mexico more than doubled, and the first waves of offshoring swept through American factories, especially in textiles and furniture. In 1995, the United States bound 98% of its tariffs at an average of just 3.5% under the Uruguay round, joining the newly created WTO. WTO's rules made those tariff cuts permanent and introduced binding dispute settlement, locking in a global system where low-cost goods could flow freely across borders. The final and most dramatic opening came in 2000 when Congress granted China permanent normal trade relations. The House voted 237 to 197. The Senate voted 83 to 15. This decision paved the way for China to enter the WTO the following year. The impact was immediate. Imports of furniture and knit textiles from China surged, with import penetration in some categories jumping by 20 to 30 percentage points within 5 years. U.S. manufacturing employment, especially in sectors like apparel and furniture, began a steep decline that would accelerate through the early 2000s. These three decisions, NAFTA, the WTO agreement, and China permanent normal trade relations, formed a rapid-fire chain. Each vote, each signature, opened the gates wider, unleashing a flood of cheap imports that American trades could not withstand. Archival testimony from trade officials like Charlene Barshefsky and Mickey Cantor captured the optimism of the era. But for many communities, these policies set in motion a wave of closures that would prove irreversible. By the early 2000s, the numbers told a clear story. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. manufacturing employment dropped by 33% between 2000 and 2010, a loss of more than 5 million jobs. In textiles and apparel, imports captured over 60% of the domestic market by the late 1990s, while domestic output fell by nearly half. The Otter-Dorn studies tracked this shift, showing that import penetration in sectors like furniture, apparel, and machine tools jumped by 15 to 30 percentage points after each major trade deal. In furniture alone, imports from China and other low-wage countries rose so sharply that domestic employment fell by 42% over 2 decades. Even as American factories adopted new technology, the scale of foreign competition far outpaced any gains from automation. As one critic put it, this was not just machines replacing people. It was entire industries replaced by container ships. Trade deal supporters often point to automation as the main culprit behind vanishing factory jobs. But government audits and industry reports tell a different story. In 2004, the Government Accountability Office reviewed manufacturing job losses and found that productivity gains from new machines explained only a fraction of the decline. The real surge came as imports from low-wage countries soared, corporate cost slides from that era show labor expenses dropping not because of robots, but because production was moved abroad. In sectors like furniture and textiles, companies invested little in advanced automation. Instead, they chased cheaper labor overseas, driven by the flood of imports unlocked by trade agreements. The numbers reveal a gap. While automation improved efficiency, it could not account for the scale or speed of job losses that swept through entire towns. The real limit of technology's reach became clear as the jobs left, but the machines stayed behind. In Youngstown, Ohio, the closure of machine tool plants set off a chain reaction that reached far beyond factory walls. When the last major toolmaker shut down in 2002, city finance ledgers recorded a sudden drop in business tax receipts, over $1.5 million lost in a single fiscal year. Dozens of small vendors, once dependent on steady orders for castings and precision parts, filed for bankruptcy within months. Union records show that the local machinists' apprenticeship program, which had trained hundreds of skilled workers each decade, quietly dissolved as demand for new tradesmen vanished. A machinist with 27 years on the job described the ripple effect. When the plant closed, it was not just our jobs. The guys who made our cutting tools, the people who delivered our steel, they all disappeared too. Trade adjustment assistance. Petitions from the region tell a similar story, with over 900 workers certified for benefits by 2004, many citing direct displacement by imported equipment from Germany and Japan. The city's school board minutes reveal another consequence. A planned expansion of vocational training was scrapped as enrollment plummeted and funding dried up. The loss of the tool trade did not just erase paychecks, it broke the supply chain that held the local economy together, leaving a gap that no new industry could fill. Lowell, Massachusetts once thrived as the heart of New England's textile industry. For generations, millwork defined the city's rhythm, shift whistles, crowded tenements, and the steady promise of a middle-class paycheck. By 1970, nearly 20,000 people in Lowell worked in textiles, but as trade barriers fell and imports from Mexico and Asia multiplied, the mills began to empty. By 2000, fewer than 2,000 textile jobs remained. Census records charted the decline. Lowell's population, which peaked at 115,000 in the 1920s, dipped to just above 100,000 by 1990, only recovering decades later as new arrivals filled the vacuum left by departing families. The economic fallout ran even deeper. Median household income, once buoyed by union wages, stagnated, rising from $45,000 in 1990 to just $65,000 by 2020, barely keeping pace with inflation and lagging behind the national average. School enrollment records from the late 1980s show a sharp drop as families left in search of work elsewhere. A former mill worker described the change simply. The jobs went first, then the neighbors, then the schools got quiet. Property tax rolls from the 1980s and the 1990s reveal a 70% drop in revenue from mill properties, forcing the city to cut services and delay repairs. An educator who taught in Lowell through the 1990s recalled how the fabric of the community unraveled. We lost more than jobs. We lost the reason people stayed. A furniture assembler in High Point, North Carolina, remembers the day the company handed out letters. The city council had just approved another round of tax credits, millions promised if the plant would stay. But the ink was barely dry before the closure notice arrived. The incentive contract, signed in 2005, required the company to keep 500 jobs for 10 years. By 2012, only 140 remained. State audits revealed that nearly a third of the jobs promised under these deals vanished within 5 years, even as public money kept flowing. Apprenticeship programs, once the pride of the region, faded away. The last class of cabinet makers graduated in 2007. No new students enrolled after that. Across the country, the story repeated itself. In steel towns, machinists and welders watched as their trades shrank by 80% from their peak. Textile mills and apparel factories lost nearly 3/4 of their workforce. Furniture jobs dropped by 42%. Auto parts, electronics assembly, and shoe manufacturing all followed the same cliff. The Bureau of Labor Statistics charted the fall. More than 5 million manufacturing jobs were lost in a single generation, with some trades nearly wiped out. These were not isolated numbers. They represented the collapse of 12 core American trades: steel, textiles, furniture, auto parts, electronics, footwear, machine tools, appliances, glass, paper, printing, and leather goods. Each one was hollowed out by the same pattern: policy-driven import surges, fleeting local incentives, and the quiet shutdown of the career ladders that once built the middle class. Today, half of all U.S. manufacturing jobs lost since 2000 trace back to policy, not just progress. As new technologies reshape the workforce again, the lesson is clear. Economic security is a choice. The value of what we keep is measured by what we are willing to let go. Share your thoughts below.